didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just picked up my purse, walked to the front door, and left. Behind me, I could hear my mother-in-law saying something to my husband. Something about how I was being dramatic. How I needed to calm down. How this was a family dinner and I should act like an adult. I closed the door behind me. Softly. I didn't slam it. That part felt important. My name is Serena. I'm 31 years old. I work as a hospital billing coordinator in Columbus, Ohio. I've been doing that job for 7 years, which means I know exactly how money moves, how accounts work, how to track every dollar in and out of a system. I'm good at it. I'm precise. I'm the kind of person who notices when something is off by 12 cents and goes back to find the mistake. I married my husband. I'll call him my husband because that's what he was, even if it doesn't feel like it anymore. 2.5 years ago. Small wedding. 30 people. A Saturday in October when the leaves were turning and the air smelled like wood smoke and everything felt possible. His name was Kyle. He had a son from his first marriage, a 7-year-old boy named Wyatt, and Wyatt's mother, Kyle's ex-wife, was a woman named Brooke. I want to be fair about Brooke. In the beginning, I tried. I really did. I bought books about co-parenting. I read articles. I told myself that Wyatt came first, that this was bigger than any discomfort I might feel, that the goal was for everyone to be healthy and stable and kind. I believed that. I still believe it. But there's a difference between co-parenting and what Kyle was doing. We moved into his parents' house 8 months after the wedding. I know how that sounds. I know. But Kyle had just left a sales job that wasn't working out, and he had an idea, he always had ideas, for starting a landscaping business. His parents had the garage space, they had the yard. They said we could stay for 6 months, maybe 8, while he got things going. His mother, I'll call her my mother-in-law, though she never really treated me like a daughter, was a retired school administrator. She ran the house like a classroom. There were rules about the kitchen, rules about the thermostat, rules about when to run the dishwasher. She was not a cruel woman. She was a woman who had very specific ideas about how things should be done, and those ideas had calcified over 63 years into something that felt like law. From the beginning, I understood that I was a guest, not a daughter, not family. A guest. She loved Kyle the way some mothers love their sons, completely, without condition, without criticism. Every decision he made was reasonable. Every failure was someone else's fault. Every idea was brilliant, even the ones that went nowhere. And they did go nowhere. The landscaping business never got off the ground. 6 months became 12, 12 became 18. I was paying our share of the bills. I was paying for Wyatt's school supplies, his soccer cleats, his annual physical co-pays. I was paying for Kyle's truck insurance and the business cards he'd had printed for the company that didn't exist yet. I kept a spreadsheet, not because I'm cold, but because that's what I do. I track things. It's how I know what's real. Kyle knew we had bills. He just didn't know what they were. He didn't know the amounts, the due dates, the account numbers. He would say things like, I'll take over all of that once the business picks up. And I would nod and go back to my spreadsheet and think, okay, we're building something. This is temporary. I told myself that for a long time. The first time Brooke came to the house, it was to drop off Wyatt. That was normal. That was fine. She'd pull up, Wyatt would run in, she'd wave from the car. Sometimes she and Kyle would talk for a few minutes in the driveway. I didn't love it, but I understood it. They had a kid together. Communication was part of that. Then one afternoon I came home from work and she was sitting at the kitchen table. Kyle was making coffee. His mother was at the counter slicing fruit. Brooke was laughing at something one of them had said. She had her shoes off. She was comfortable in a way that told me this was not the first time. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Nobody looked up. Hey, I finally said. Kyle looked over. Oh hey, you're home early. I wasn't home early. I was home at exactly the time I was always home. I said hello to Brooke. She smiled at me. A smile that was perfectly pleasant and told me absolutely nothing. I went to the bedroom, changed out of my work clothes, and sat on the edge of the bed for a few minutes just reading. Later I asked Kyle how often she came inside. He shrugged. She's Wyatt's mom. She's always been welcome here. Here in your parents' house, I said. Or here in our house? Because I'm not sure we've established what this place is. He told me I was being sensitive. I want to be honest about the months that followed, because it's easy to make this into a simple story. Bad husband, Bill and mother-in-law, innocent wife, and it wasn't quite that simple. There were good days. There were Sunday mornings when Kyle made pancakes, and Wyatt climbed into my lap and my mother-in-law softened enough to ask about my week. There were moments when I thought, we are going to figure this out. But the pattern underneath those good days never changed. Kyle made promises he didn't keep. Not big dramatic promises. Not the kind you could point to and say, there, that's the lie. Small ones. I'll call the client Monday. I'll set up the bank account this week. I'll talk to my mom about the garage situation. Quiet, forgettable promises that dissolved before they could be broken, because neither of us ever said them out loud again. And Brooke kept coming inside. Sometimes with reasons. Wyatt forgot his retainer. She needed to sign a form. She wanted to drop off the birthday gift from her parents early. Sometimes without any reason I could identify. She would just be there, sitting at the table, on the couch, in the backyard with Wyatt and Kyle while I was making dinner alone in a kitchen that didn't feel like mine. My mother-in-law loved her. That was the part I hadn't expected. She'd known Brooke for years. They'd had a relationship before I ever existed. I understood that intellectually. But understanding something and living inside it are two different things. One evening, I heard my mother-in-law tell someone on the phone that Brooke was still part of this family. She didn't lower her voice. I don't think she thought I could hear. Or maybe she did and she wanted me to. I stood in the hallway and I thought, I see exactly where I stand. November came around and Kyle told me, not asked me, that Brooke would be coming to Thanksgiving. We were lying in bed. The lights were already off. He said it the way you say something you've already decided, something you're mentioning as a courtesy. Brooke's gonna come for part of Thanksgiving. Wyatt wants her there, and my parents think it's a good idea for him to have both of them. I didn't say anything right away. She won't stay the whole time, he added, just for the meal. I asked him when he decided this. He said his mom had brought it up a week ago and he'd thought about it and it made sense. A week. He had sat with this for a week and not said a word. I asked him if he'd considered asking me first. He said he didn't think he needed to ask. It was his parents' house. It was his son. It was just dinner. I turned on my side, away from him, and I stared at the wall, and I thought about the spreadsheet on my laptop. The one with 17 months of entries, the rent contribution, the groceries, the utilities we'd offered to split even though they hadn't asked us to, Wyatt's things, Kyle's truck, the business cards. I thought about all of that, and I thought he didn't think he needed to ask. I need to tell you something, and I want you to understand that it wasn't impulsive. The week before Thanksgiving, I made an appointment with a family law attorney. Her office was downtown, 12 minutes from my job. I took a long lunch. I sat across from her at a clean desk, and I laid out the situation calmly, and I asked her to explain my options. I had not made any decisions. I just wanted to know what was true. She was practical and direct, which I appreciated. We talked for an hour. When I left, I had a folder of information and a business card, and the particular kind of clarity that comes from putting a thing into words out loud in front of a witness. I drove back to work. I ate the other half of my sandwich at my desk. I opened my spreadsheet. I still hadn't made any decisions. But I stopped pretending I wasn't thinking about it. Thanksgiving morning, I helped set the table. I folded the napkins the way my mother-in-law liked them. I brought out the serving dishes from the cabinet she'd shown me once and told me never to forget where they went. I made my grandmother's sweet potato casserole from scratch, the one with the brown sugar and pecans on top. The one that takes 3 hours if you do it right. I did it right. Around 2 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Brooke came in wearing a burgundy sweater and earrings that caught the light. She hugged my mother-in-law first, then Kyle. Then she crouched down and opened her arms, and Wyatt ran into them, and she held him the way mothers hold their kids. Instinctively, without thinking, with her whole body. And I watched that and I thought, she belongs here in a way that I don't. Not because of anything she did, just because it was true. She smiled at me when she stood up. Serena, hi. Everything smells amazing. Thank you, I said. We sat down to eat. My mother-in-law had put Brooke across from me and next to Kyle. Wyatt was between his parents. I was at the end of the table, next to my mother-in-law's sister, a woman I'd met twice. I looked at that arrangement for a moment. Then I looked at my plate. Then I picked up my fork. Kyle was telling a story. Brooke was laughing. Wyatt was pulling the pecans off the top of my casserole one by one, which he always did, which I always pretended not to notice. My mother-in-law was refilling water glasses. Everything looked from the outside like a family having Thanksgiving. I was the only one who could see that I wasn't in the picture. My mother-in-law said something. I caught the end of it. Something about how this was how holidays should be. Everyone together, no bitterness. She looked at me when she said the last part, pointedly, as if bitterness were something I was bringing to the table when nobody else had thought of it. Kyle nodded. He was agreeing with her. I set down my fork. I reached into the bag I'd hung on the back of my chair. I'd put it there that morning, deliberately, when I was setting the table. Nobody had noticed. Nobody had asked. I took out an envelope and I slid it across the table to Kyle. He looked at it. He looked at me. "What is this?" he said. "Open it," I said. He opened it, I said. He opened it. I watched his face change. The color left it the way color leaves a room when a cloud passes over the sun. Gradually, then all at once. He stared at the papers. He read the first page twice, I think. Maybe 3 times. Serena. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. My mother-in-law asked what was happening. I pushed my chair back from the table. I picked up my bag. I looked at Wyatt, who was watching me with wide eyes and a pecan still in his hand. And I said, "Happy Thanksgiving, buddy. Save me some pie." He nodded. He didn't understand. He was 7. That was okay. I looked at Kyle one more time. He still hadn't closed the envelope. "I've already found an apartment," I said. "I move in December 1st. I didn't say anything else. There wasn't anything else to say. I picked up my purse. I walked to the front door. I closed it behind me, softly, on my way out. The air outside was cold, sharp, the kind of November afternoon where the sky is white and the bare trees look like they were drawn in ink. I walked to my car, got in, and sat there for a minute. My phone buzzed, then again. Then it started ringing. I turned it face down on the passenger seat and I drove. I went to my friend Dana's place across town. She'd known something was off for months. She'd never asked me to explain it. She opened the door before I knocked, and she handed me a glass of wine and she said, "Okay, talk." So I talked. I moved into my apartment on December 1st the way I said I would. It was a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building near a park. Not fancy. Clean. Mine. I had a couch, a bed frame, a kitchen table I bought secondhand from a woman on Facebook Marketplace for $40, and a window that faced east so I got the morning light. I made my grandmother's sweet potato casserole on Christmas Eve alone in my own kitchen. I ate it for dinner watching a movie I'd wanted to see for months that Kyle had never wanted to watch. I was asleep by 10. I won't tell you it didn't hurt. It did. Grief is grief, even when you chose it. Even when you know you made the right call. But I remember waking up on Christmas morning in my own apartment, with my own coffee, in my own silence, and thinking, I can breathe here. I forgot what that felt like. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. Kyle and Brooke got back together within the year. I heard this from Dana, who heard it from someone else. I wasn't surprised. I think some part of me had known, the way you know something you don't want to know, for a long time. I didn't feel what I expected to feel when I heard it. No devastation, no vindication even. Mostly I felt tired, and then I felt something very quiet that might have been relief. Wyatt still sends me drawings sometimes. His dad facilitates it, which I appreciate more than I probably show. Last month, Wyatt drew a picture of a woman at a table with a big orange dish in front of her and wrote at the bottom, in his 7-year-old handwriting, "The best casserole." I put it on my refrigerator. It's still there. I've had people ask me, friends, my sister, a coworker once who knew pieces of the story, whether I regret waiting so long, whether I should have seen it sooner, whether I gave up too easily or not easily enough. I don't have a clean answer to that. What I know is this. I gave that marriage everything I had. I paid the bills, I folded the napkins the right way, I tried to make room for a child who wasn't mine and a past that came with the man I chose. I wasn't perfect. I was sometimes too quiet about things I should have said and probably too sharp on the days when the quiet ran out. But I know what it looks like when someone chooses not to choose you. I know how that feels, and I know that I sat with it for a long time before I decided I was done, sliding those papers across the table on Thanksgiving. I've thought about that moment more times than I can count. Whether it was right, whether it was fair to Wyatt, whether it was dramatic. Here's what I've come back to every time. I had tried, quietly, for months. I had asked, calmly, for months. I had hoped and waited and told myself it would get better. The only thing I hadn't done was make the thing undeniable. So I made it undeniable. And when I walked out of that house on Thanksgiving afternoon into the cold November air and I got in my car and I drove away, I was not angry. I was not sad. I was not triumphant. I was just done. Finally, completely, peacefully done. And that was enough. I thought a lot about why things ended the way they did. Not with a fight, not with accusations or slammed doors or anything that looked, from the outside, like a breaking point. Just an envelope. A cold November afternoon. A door closed softly on the way out. A cold November afternoon. People want there to be a single moment, the thing that caused all of it. And I understand that. We want stories to be clean. We want a villain and a decision and a clear line between before and after. But the truth is, nothing that happened at that Thanksgiving table came from that day. It came from 17 months of small choices that other people made, and small choices that I made too. Kyle chose again and again not to ask me. His mother chose to treat me like a guest in a house I was helping pay for. And I chose to stay quiet, to wait, to tell myself it would get better, long past the point where I knew it wouldn't. That's the part I had to sit with. Not what they did, but what I allowed. And for how long. I'm not saying I was a victim. I was a grown woman with a spreadsheet and a full-time job and the ability to leave at any point. I stayed because I believed in something. In the marriage, in the idea that if I just held on a little longer, things would shift. And maybe that belief was its own kind of wisdom at first. But at some point, it became something else. It became avoidance dressed up as patience. What I know now is that there's a difference between endurance and self-erasure. Endurance is choosing to stay through difficulty because you believe something is worth building. Self-erasure is shrinking yourself down until you fit into the space someone else decided you could have. I had crossed that line somewhere around month 10 and I hadn't even noticed. The envelope wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't a performance or a power move or something I'd been planning to make dramatic. It was just the moment I stopped pretending. The moment I let what was true become visible, out loud, in front of everyone at that table. And that took a different kind of courage than I'd expected. Not the loud, confrontational kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that asks you to stop protecting other people from the consequences of their own choices. The kind that says, I have been honest with myself for months. Now I am going to be honest with the room. Wyatt still sends me drawings. That matters to me more than I can fully explain, because whatever happened between the adults in that house, I tried to show up for him with consistency and warmth. And some part of that, I hope, stayed. I'm 32 now. My apartment gets good morning light. I make my grandmother's casserole when I want to for people who appreciate it. I sleep well. That's not nothing. That's actually everything.